Hi class, over the weekend I graded your summaries and your write-ups on reliability and credibility for the article. The college completion rates are up, but the numbers will still surprise you. And so having looked at those, I wanted to give you all some tips on how to make any changes that might be needed. Remember that that article, the college completion rates are up, but the numbers will still surprise you, is an article that each one of you will do for your final annotated bibliography project, right? That will have 2 articles in it. That will be one of the articles, and the second one will be an article that you find. And so you will have a chance, anything, if you scored less than a 10 on either your summary or the citation and the reliability credibility assignment, then you can have a chance to fix those before you turn it in again for the annotated bibliography assignment, so you don't have points taken off of it again. All right, so let's talk about ways to correct some of the things. I gave you all write-ups in the comment section for each assignment, but I just wanted to give a general overview for everybody. Okay, so first, I don't know if we talked about this, about article titles. So in MLA style, the titles of articles, things that are contained within something else, should be in quotation marks. So our article, college completion rates are up, but the numbers will still surprise you, should be in quotation marks. That's contained within the website NPR, so NPR should be in italics. So those big works, right, the things that an article might be contained in should be in italics. So a website like NPR, or a newspaper like New York Times. An article in the New York Times would be in quotation marks. The name of the newspaper, the New York Times, should be in italics. And something like a book would have, like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, should also be in italics. If you were talking about a particular chapter in a book, that would be in quotation marks. But the book's title would also be in italics. So the bigger things, italics, things within those big things, like articles, like chapters, should be in quotation marks. Okay, moving on. We're going to talk about the summary section. I'm always amazed because, for people summarizing the very same article, no 2 summaries are ever the same in my classes. And so I have 2 classes of info. And so, like I said, no 2 summaries are the same, but we make a lot of the same kind of mistakes. And so that's why I wanted to give these tips. And then in the slides to come, I actually have some examples that I pulled out from both of my classes of people who are doing it wrong, because I think it's easier to see it when we have actual examples and know what to fix. And so don't feel embarrassed that if it's your example, I don't have any names on there. I've already told you probably the same things I'm going to say in this about what's wrong, but I think it really helps everybody to see some wrong examples that we learn best from our mistakes. So I'm going to show you some examples of some of these tips that I'm going to talk about now. Okay, so the first tip is that summary should always be written in third person. You're referring to the author either as she, in this case, Elisa Nadworny, or using her last name. After you've given, on the first reference, you give her full name, Elisa Nadworny. After that, you can just refer to her as Nadworny. Nadworny says this. You shouldn't use any I learned, or you can see by these numbers. No first person, no second person. It should all be written in that third person using she said this, or she referred to a report that said this, or she interviewed this person who said this. So it should be written like that. Make sure you're staying neutral, not offering any opinion, even just adding one word. Somebody added one that said, luckily this happened, okay? And that was a different tone than was in the article. And so make sure you stay neutral, stay true to the tone of the article, and don't put any of your own opinion in there. Even saying like this great article, or I really liked this article in the last sentence. No opinion at all. Make sure you're giving credit to the author throughout, right? That kind of refers to being written in third person, is that don't just refer to the author in the first sentence and then just generally talk about the article. Make sure you're giving credit to the author throughout. And we'll look at some examples of those. And then make sure you're covering the whole article. For a lot of you, the last part of this article talked about what if we give students 8 years to graduate. A lot of people didn't even mention that section, and it's a bigger section in the article, and it's a section under a subhead. And so that should maybe be included in your summary. So make sure you're covering everything beginning to end. All right, so here is some examples. All right. Make sure you're including the author throughout. Okay, so this article, to summarize, it's not just the entirety of college students that are failing, it's specifically the ones who attend community college and for-profit schools. These kind of schools tend to be uncompetitive when it comes to entry, making easily accessible. Now, first of all, that's not necessarily contained in the article. They don't really go into depth talking about the reasons why. And so that might not even be necessary. Unfortunately, this comes at the cost of the school having fewer resources concerning the success of their students. It just so happens that this issue affects more African American and Hispanic students. So I like the tone of this. It's more conversational, but a summary should be more formal, right? And so instead of it just so happens, okay, it doesn't just so happens, they did research on this, right? And so talk about how Nadworny reports or gives statistics that show that African American students and Hispanic students have lower completion rates than Asian and white students. Okay, so you want to be giving credit all throughout. This does not give any credit here to the author at all. And it's all the author's information. Okay, and so also, again, more formal tone. Like I said, this is a great conversational tone. It might be a great paper, but this isn't a good tone for a summary. And so you want to make it a little bit more formal and make sure you're giving credit to the author all throughout, not making it sound like it's your ideas. So make sure that the titles are in MLA style, and you want to make sure it flows right? Like this first one, whoops, I need to go in to this version. Now it's going to be harder for you to see, but I want to edit it as we go. In college completions are up, but the numbers, make sure you're getting the title right? Because this one is actually, but the numbers will still surprise you. So the comma should be here in the article, and then Elisa Nadworny states that only 58% of college students started school in the fall and earned a degree. Article title is in quotation marks. We have the author named. Okay, in the next one, okay, this is where we want to make sure that it flows. And a lot of students have trouble making their first sentence flow and figuring out how to get the title in there and the author's name in there and still make it read right. So this one says the summary of, okay, and again, we know now college completion rates are up, but the numbers will still surprise you. By Elisa Nadworny on March 13th, 2019, she was talking about the rate at which students in colleges and universities graduate. And this is something that I see a lot where we have like the author's name and then maybe referred to as she. So a couple things we can do to fix this. First of all, we don't need to have the date. That's kind of just distracting. We'll have it in the works cited information if people want to know. Okay, so usually best just to start in the article. College completion rates are up, but the numbers will still surprise you. And then just give the author's name. Oh, it's going to be funky now. It's going to go off the page here. Elisa Nadworny. Talks about the rate at which students in colleges and universities graduate. Okay, so see how that flows much better. That's how you would read it. It sounds just much better together. Okay, so make sure that your first sentence flows. All right, last one, and I'll make this bigger so you can see. Don't include opinion, right? So these are the last two lines from another student's summary. Okay, and so at this point, the writer of this was doing a little bit of response to the article. This article showed me just how drastically different the college completions are than what I initially thought. The author gave clear information. Okay, so this is all opinion. So unfortunately, this just has to go, right? And this student had written a summary above this and then kind of threw in these lines of response at the end. Those are not needed, and you don't want to have any opinion in your summary. Okay, this student, again, talk about a nice tone and conversational, but again, it's not giving credit to the author. After reading the article, college completion rates are up, but the numbers will still surprise you. I now know that only 50% of people started in the fall semester ended up getting type degree, I also know, okay, no first person. I'm glad that the student learned this stuff from the article, but we're not giving any credit to the author for having done this research and giving the information to that person. And so no first person. In the article, college completions are up. Elisa Nadworny reported that only 58% of people who started ended up with a degree. In addition, she says that two-year community colleges have graduation rate percentage of less than 40%. So then we're giving credit to the author all throughout. Okay, so reliability and credibility of sources. I think you guys did a good job with this for, kind of our first attempt at this. A lot of you looked at the CRAP test and you told me about the date was good. You told me it was good for a .org is better, things like that. But I want you to do a little bit more than that, right? Because don't rely on the fact, well, it's .org, it must be okay. Like my church is also a .org organization. And I would say that my church is probably biased, right? It's a Christian church, Episcopal church. They have a certain bias going on. And so just because it's a .org doesn't mean that it is a, totally fair game kind of source. So beyond the CRAP test, I also want you to make sure that you're Googling things. And for a lot of you, I said, consider who the organization is, the NPR, if they are a reliable and credible source. Think about where that article was published, because sometimes that organization has a bias. It's okay for an organization to have a bias, but as a reader and as a researcher, you need to be aware of that bias. One way you can figure out if a publication is biased is through the beauty of the internet. Just Google media bias chart. Okay, and so this is the media bias chart. And it is a ranking done by this company that ranks more and more publications every day on how reliable and credible they are. And so you want things that are up at the top in the middle, right? And so if they are this way, then they skew left. If they're this way, they skew right. So more Republican, more Democratic leaning. You want something probably that's going to be pretty neutral around the middle. Media is always charged with being a little bit too liberal. And so, so they might tend to skew a little to the right, but you don't want something that falls on either end. You also want to have these organizations are definitely reporting fact. As you get further away from that, you're getting things that contain less fact. And so these are sources that maybe you can't believe as much. All right, so you'll see right here in the middle, straight in the middle, NPR. That's where our source was from. So we know that it's a reliable source. Another thing I could do is Google NPR, try to look it up on Wikipedia. Yes, I said you can look it up on Wikipedia. I gotta use the big name, National Public Radio. Let's see what it says. And so usually that will tell you something about the source too. National Public Radio is an American privately and publicly funded nonprofit media organization, So I can read about NPR and find out if it's a reliable and credible source. Same thing, I can Google the author's name. And so I want you to take those extra steps in looking up that information. Okay, last thing, because I know this video is going a little bit long, is MLA citations. All I can tell you is that you have to look them up, right? I told you that on library websites, they cite the sources for you. But if you're looking something up on the internet, it's not going to cite the source for you. And so then you have to look it up. You have to go to the Purdue OWL is where I go to. And I've been teaching this for years, and I still always double check my MLA style by going to the Purdue OWL website. All right, so this is Works Cited page. It tells you about the basic format, about how to make a Works Cited page. But then I can also look over here. Click this open. I want MLA style. Let's see. There we go. All right, Works Cited page. For most of the time, I'm going to do electronic sources. And I think I had linked right to electronic sources for you. And so then just become familiar with the different kinds of sources. Citing an entire website? Nope. Course or department website? Nope. A page on a website, right? That's what we had for our NPR article. So this is the format. You can look at these examples and try to copy that format with author's last name, article title, the name of the website in italics, and then the URL. You use the date of access if you don't have a date of publication, like the second one has the date of publication, so you don't need a date of access. So the answer with MLA style is you just have to look it up and look it up every time. It's just that hard and that easy.